Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Aron Nimzowitsch, my system. The customary quote: those who dare to fail miserably can achieve greatly. From the 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. A brief review of the last part where we started chapter 4, the two bishops, part 2 of the book, position play, and discussed the topics relative strength of bishop and knight, the Horwitz bishops, and how the bishops support a pawn mass and hem in enemy knights, with illustrations from Nimzowitsch. So now, moving further in the book, Nimzowitsch discusses the next topic under the heading number 4, fight against a pawn majority with simultaneous hemming in of the enemy knights. Nimzowitsch writes, the hemming in of the knights with simultaneous fight against a pawn majority is a very different problem. One would say, to the solving of which outstanding technical ability will be needed. But this is not so. Anyone who is moderately versed in the art of restraining and blockading pawn complexes will soon find to their satisfaction that in the class of positions in question, the hemming in of the knights is more easily compassed than in the case considered under topic number 3 previously in this chapter. We can say with some justice that the restraint of the pawn majority once in operation carries with it automatically the hemming in of the knights. That is to say, the blockaded pawns may easily develop into obstructions to their own knights. An example is found in the following game, Harmonist versus Tarrasch, Breslau 1889. Max Harmonist was a German chess master who played around the turn of the 20th century. He was also a professional ballet dancer who often performed in the Royal Ballet. Nimzowitsch continues. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, knight f6, castles, knight takes on e4, d4, knight d6, bishop takes on c6, d takes on c6, d takes on e5, knight f5, queen takes on d8 check, king takes on d8, bishop g5 check, king e8, knight c3, h6, bishop f4, and bishop e6. White's majority has but slight mobility. Rook d1, rook d8, knight e4, c5, rook takes on d8 check, king takes on d8, rook d1 check, king c8, h3, d6, king f1, bishop e7, a3, rook d8, rook takes on d8 check, and king takes on d8. The exchange of rooks has sensibly increased the radius of action of black's king. c3, bishop d5, knight d2, king d7, king e2, g5, bishop h2, knight h4, g3, knight g6, f4, king e6, king e3, c4, knight f3, g takes on f4 check, g takes on f4, and c5. In the position now reached, white's pieces are fairly well shut in. This gratifying state of affairs has followed almost automatically from black's successfully executed blockade of white's pawn at e5, and in particular his pawn at f4. This cannot surprise us, for have we not often experienced how the whole situation may be favorably affected as if by a miracle by successful blockade? knight g3, knight h4, knight takes on h4, bishop takes on h4, knight e4, bishop e7, bishop g1, and bishop c6. The intention is king d5 followed by bishop to d7 to f5, driving the knight yet further back. Bishop f2, bishop d7, and bishop g3. Knight d6 offered the possibility of a draw by playing for bishops on opposite color. So bishop g3, king d5, knight f2, h5, king f3, and bishop f5, blockade. King e3, b5, king f3, a5, and king e3. White is stalemated. b4, king f3, king c6, and a takes on b4. White is lost. C takes on b4, c takes on b4, a takes on b4, knight e4, king d5, knight d6, bishop takes on d6, e takes on d6, c3, b takes on c3, and b3, where white resigned the game. Moving further, Nimzowitsch discusses the next topic under the heading number 5, the two bishops in the endgame. Nimzowitsch writes, "We regard as the ideal the transmutation or transformation of an advantage founded only in the class of weapon employed to one which is clearly and perceptibly strategical. For instance, that of the aggressive position of our pieces as opposed to the passive one of our opponents." Reference first part of the book, 6th chapter, 2nd topic, the aggressive rook position. Combined play with two bishops leading to such a transmutation as we have mentioned comes out in the following example. Consider the position on board. Michel versus Tartakover, 1925. Reginald Price Michel was an English chess master who played around the turn of the 20th century. Nimzowitsch continues, "White's position is well consolidated, and the weakness of the black squares c3, d4 does not appear important. The continuation was king g1, king g7, king f1, bishop c6, knight g1, g5, knight f3, and h5. The two pawns advance, since they feel themselves to be a qualitative majority, owing to the exalted protection which they enjoy, supported as they are by two bishops. Bishop e2, rook e4, bishop d3, rook f4, king e2, g4, h takes on g4, h takes on g4, knight h2, g3, and knight f3. Black has, quite rightly, not pursued any further the advantage to be got from hemming in the knight. What he now has got is more valuable. White's pawn at g2 has become a mark for attack, and the white pieces, particularly the knight at f3, are from now on forced to keep perpetual watch over that pawn. This strategical advantage very soon brings a decision. d4, rook f1, b4, knight d2, rook h4, knight f3, and rook h8. From here, he threatens at once the point h2 and the e file. King d2, for with apologies to Goethe and his translator, where of good moves there is a failing, a botch steps promptly in as deputy. Rook h2, knight takes on h2, g takes on h2, rook h1, bishop e5, bishop f1, and bishop e4, a charming situation. King d1, king f6, king d2, king g5, king d1, and king g4, where white resigned the game. Nimzowitsch writes of this position alongside its diagram as follows. Tartakover as black realizes one after the other various chances given him by his bishops. Nimzowitsch continues, we have now done enough for the glorification of the bishops, and a few words may be added on situations in which they do not cut such a good figure. These are wholly or half-closed positions. See for example games number 15 and 38. While they are astonishingly weak against an unassailable centrally posted knight. Please note that game number 15 was covered in part 27 of this video series, whereas we shall cover game number 38 towards the end of the video series, along with any other remaining games from the illustrative game section of the book. Nimzowitsch continues, even in the position on board, it would seem to me that black can maintain themselves against the Horwitz bishops. Nimzowitsch writes of this position alongside its diagram as follows. Black's position appears to be defensible. The bishops are less formidable than they look. Nimzowitsch continues, in the next chapter, we shall pass to overprotection. An excellent example of play with two bishops will be found in game number 41, Lasker versus Byrne. See also game number 47, Gregory versus Nimzowitsch. The chapter concludes here. We will now go through game number 41 of the illustrative game section as recommended by Nimzowitsch. Game number 47 will be covered towards the end of the video series. Game number 41 was played between EMANUEL Lasker versus AMOS Byrne in the St. Petersburg tournament of 1909, St. Petersburg, Russian Empire. Amos Byrne was an English chess player and writer. He was one of the leading chess players at the turn of the 20th century. Nimzowitsch writes of the game as following. A most complicated game in the strategical sense. Lasker maneuvers on one wing and breaks through on the other. The why and the wherefore of this procedure will be found explained in the notes. EMANUEL Lasker with the white pieces and Amos Byrne with the black. Notes by Aron Nimzowitsch. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castles, bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3, d6, c3, knight a5, bishop c2, c5, d4, queen c7, knight d2, knight c6, knight f1, and castles, question mark. Black ought to have tried to force white to declare his intentions in the center. Therefore, c takes on d4, c takes on d4, and bishop g4. So, castles and knight e3, intending to invade the center with knight d5. Bishop g4 and knight takes on g4. The reply to knight d5 would have been queen a7, knight takes on e7 check, and knight takes on e7. With a text move, knight takes on g4. Lasker plays for the advantage of the two bishops. Knight takes on g4, h3, knight f6, bishop e3, knight d7, queen e2, bishop f6, rook d1, knight e7, bishop b1, knight b6, a3, knight g6, g3, and rook e8. Black has consistently kept his end in mind, that is to prepare for d5. So now Lasker finds himself forced to play d5, thus blocking his own bishop. The game now enters a new stage. d5, knight d7, king g2, and queen d8. Instead of this, he should have played c4 followed by knight c5. The knight would have been well posted and, more important, would have a preventive effect, for white was preparing for c4 inter alia, or among other things. So queen d8, h4, bishop e7, h5, knight f8, rook h1, h6, rook g1, and knight h7. g5 seems now strongly fortified for black. King f1, king h8, rook h2, rook g8, and knight e1. If knight h4, black would simply exchange bishop takes on h4, rook takes on h4, and the game would then take on a somewhat rigid aspect. Lasker therefore wisely avoids knight h4 and seeks to preserve whatever latent or hidden dynamic force there is in the position, little though this be. As such, knight e1, rook b8, knight c2, a5, bishop d2, bishop f6, f3, knight b6, and rook f2. White intends to play knight e3 and wishes to hold the move f4 in readiness should black play bishop g5. Lasker. Knight c8, king g2, queen d7, king h1, knight e7, rook h2, rook b7, rook f1, rook e8, knight e3, knight g8, f4, bishop d8, and queen f3. Lasker has succeeded in carrying out f4 under circumstances favorable to himself, but there was no direct advantage to be got by the move. However, black's pieces, which have to keep on the lookout against the threat of an invasion by knight f5, are less well posted in case of an attack on the queen's wing. And so we may say that Lasker has laid the king's wing under siege in order to bring the enemy pieces out of contact with their own queen's wing, and will now roll up this left wing and thus score a double advantage. Definite weaknesses are to be created, and in addition his bishops are to get room for maneuvering. For instance, by c4, b4, bishop c2, followed by queen d1 and bishop a4. c4, a4, bishop b6, a takes on b5, and queen takes on b5, question mark. The decisive error. The right course, as Lasker pointed out in the book of the Congress, was bishop takes on e3, bishop takes on e3, and queen takes on b5, followed by a4 and rook a8, and black's game is tenable. So queen takes on b5, knight f5, queen d7, queen g4, and f6. The knight at f5 can no longer be driven away by, say, knight e7. Black has now evident weaknesses on both wings, and Lasker exploits them without any particular trouble. Bishop c2, bishop c5, rook a1, rook b8, bishop c1, queen c7, bishop a4, queen b6, rook g2, rook f7, queen e2, queen a6, and bishop c6, threatening b4, knight e7. At last he manages to oust the intruder at f5, but meanwhile white is grown too strong on the queen's wing. Knight takes on e7, rook takes on e7, rook a4, and e takes on f4. Desperation. There followed g takes on f4, f5, e5, knight f6, rook takes on c4, knight takes on, knight g4, rook takes on c5, queen takes on e2, rook takes on e2, d takes on c5, d6, rook a7, e6, rook a6, e7, knight f6, b7, knight takes on d7, and bishop takes on d7, where black resigned the game. This fine game is instructive as illustrating inter alia, or among other things, the struggle of united bishops for open country in which to maneuver. Alright, we conclude this part of Aron Nimzowitsch My System here. In the upcoming part, we shall start the next chapter in the book, Overprotection. Here is a look at the recent channel support from my Twitch stream. Several new supporters: almholme, USDave, mareares, Twilant, OsnaChess, and Free Time Streaming. Free Time Streaming is a fellow streamer. I will post a link to his stream in the video description. Do check him out. Thank you for the kind support, everyone. Much appreciated. Alright, till next time, take care.